Hello, Chetan. Good to see you again, and very welcome to the CTO Focus Session.
Thanks a lot, Erik. Good to see you too.
This time we're going to chat a little bit about some recent research that you've done, and it relates really to the maturity of mobile infrastructure. But let's start with the market. What is your take on the market right now?
I think if you look at the amount of revenue that has been generated by 5G, if you look at the number of subscribers that have been onboarded on 5G in markets like US, India, China, Japan, Korea, we see 5G spreading much faster than any previous generation. And we've also seen 5G getting into the enterprise and industrial applications as well.
Yeah, it's good momentum, and still there's much more to do because this is, in many markets, actually not the full experience of 5G, which we're going to talk a lot about now. But that's also the reason for this mobile infrastructure maturity index. So can you say something more about it? What is it and how did it come about?
Sure. We wanted a way to measure the maturity of the infrastructure at a more granular level, looking at the spectrum, looking at how much coverage there is of midband. It's one thing to acquire spectrum, but if you have not deployed it, then you are not doing justice to that spectrum. We looked at availability of SA standalone in a given country from a given operator. We looked at the software maturity, the various releases that are available for upgrades. We looked at differentiated connectivity. And then we looked at the industries and networks that take advantage of the various capabilities like fixed wireless, private networks, slicing, and so on and so forth in the network, and scored each of them for various countries to see where everybody lands. And it's an open index. Everybody can score themselves. Operators can score themselves. They can score against the best operators in the world, best countries in the world. And it's a way to measure progress.
That self-assessment, I think, is an important part. So you can also track it over a number of years. Are you actually making progress on these key metrics? Now, there has been a lot of work also understanding what usage we have of 5G in different sectors, whether it's healthcare, whether it's mining, ports, all of that. So I was quite intrigued. And from my point of view, it was a little bit of an inspiration for this index when I interviewed with or actually visited myself the National Hospital of Singapore, where they had, since some time actually back now, implemented 5G indoor, also in the operating theater, using HoloLens technology or using holomedicine to be able to do better surgery with, of course, lower cost for the hospital overall, but patient outcomes were significantly improved, something like 25-30% better patient outcomes. Really great results. Now they are taking that to the home care, they're taking it to the ambulances, a countrywide 5G infrastructure with slicing and priority, and it's changing the healthcare system because 5G becomes that fabric, of course, together with AI and cloud, that allows them to make a completely shift in how they think about patient care. So you also had some great insights when it comes to businesses and use cases.
I think just like the healthcare system can transform a country, so can the port infrastructure, which deals with 90-95% of the global trade. And so if you modernize that port infrastructure, it helps you cycle through a lot of the containers, lots of shipments, a lot of the trade at much faster pace. And so the country's export, import, and the dollar amount that's flowing in can increase sharply on a port by port basis. And so we found that countries like Singapore, Netherlands, Portugal, China, India have really invested in their ports, and that is having a direct impact on how mature the ports are. And so I think one of the insights from the research was that there is a direct correlation between the maturity of the network or the infrastructure and the maturity of the use cases and operational metrics of these use cases, whether it's the hospital of the wonderful use case that you just mentioned in Singapore, or the ports, or you look at the emergency networks in various countries, like in the US, T priority, they're using it for providing resilient networks using network slicing in New York and elsewhere. You see that in entertainment venues, sports venues, where latency requirements and the bandwidth requirements are very high. And so you see a direct correlation between the infrastructure available, the maturity of that, to the maturity of the use cases. And then there are other use cases like in manufacturing, You see the factories that have invested in this infrastructure tend to be operationally more efficient, and you can see that in the data that has come out.
It is very exciting, Chetan, and we have suspected that since long, I would say. Now you put the numbers behind it, and of course, it's early days in some sectors, some industries, but some have actually come quite far. So I think it's a great read for everyone to dig in, not just to these specific countries and use cases, but to see the overall picture of how extremely important it is to have a leading 5G infrastructure for competitiveness of the country, and of course, to spur growth and innovation in the sectors that you perhaps already are strong in, but this is a next step. So I think a lot of learnings for governments, but also, of course, for operators by reading the report. If you would take some key learnings from the work that you've done and what's in the report, what would maybe the 2 to 3 top ones be?
I think one is there is a tight linkage between the maturity of the infrastructure, maturity of the policies, and the diffusion process in a given country. And so everything has to be very intentional and deliberate. And you cannot have an infrastructure without policies or diffusion process. Similarly, policies and diffusion doesn't do you any good if you don't have the infrastructure in place. And so countries and operators have to work together. Cloud infrastructure providers have to work together to make sure the infrastructure is there to really have the policies in place and the diffusion process in their industries in place. That's number one. Number two is you really have to embed these technologies into the workflow. Just like you mentioned how the outcomes in the Singapore hospital have changed, just like how we saw the outcomes in ports have changed. It's because they have embedded these technologies like 5G and AI and so on and so forth into the workflow, the work stream of how one hospital works or how a port works, and so on and so forth. And the third is if the tool does a gap analysis for you as well, and so you can measure how far behind or ahead you are with countries in industries that matter to you. And you can look at the use case maturity as well. Are you seeing 10% gains or are you seeing 50% gains? Why is that? Is because of the infrastructure or is some other operational metric, or maybe the policies are lacking? And so it gives a way to really have a framework for the ecosystem to come together to really understand how to modernize your respective industries.
And that is one of the obvious but early learnings, that once you have the digital infrastructure with a strong 5G in place, it actually helps to drive the evolution of the complete industry, the ecosystem around it. And that's, of course, critical for many of these sectors. They have unique requirements that needs to be satisfied with certain devices or with certain integration in the workflow, to your point. And that happens, of course, as a result of a really strong infrastructure. Well, it's exciting research, Chetan, and I'm hopeful. Actually, I'm quite convinced that this would be a good read for many in the industry. And as you said, you can do self-assessment. It's also about following through and maybe follow up every 6 months, every 12 months. You can track this over time, and I agree with you. I think this could be a good tool to be able to actually judge the maturity and where you want to be and where you need to be. So great chatting to you, Chetan, as always, and thanks for the good collaboration. Also, hope to see you soon, and I know you have an important event upcoming here with a Mobile Future Forward. So good luck with that one as well.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Erik.